Welcome to Profiletraders. This is Reza and you're listening to my market analysis for August the 25th. Yesterday, as we closed quite catastrophically towards the bottom end of the range, I told you from my last night video, which you can go check, that nothing was going to change this bearishness until we would remain below 1950. And I told you that there was absolutely no other level of resistance of importance besides 1950. So this morning as we came, obviously all the work of central bank, because nobody when it's right with his sane brain was gonna buy a market from 1874 and gap it up at 1847, almost an 80 points gap up, while the Chinese market crashed against 7.6%. So it was very clear that this was nothing but the work of the Fed, and I tell you why. If they would have not taken up to 1950, the drop that you see today with this catastrophic close at the very low at 1874, if you would have added this drop, let's say from the low of the overnight, obviously you can have seen the disastrous headlines that the news media would have come up with another 500-600 points crash. But now, because they took it to 1950 and we dropped from 1950 to 1868, it's almost where we closed yesterday, and they are going to show the market as unchanged, and the dumb idiot public will say, holy cow, we have stabilized. It is now time to go bargain hunting. So it's an absolute disaster what they are doing. They are trying to basically spend billions upon billions to avoid the unavoidable, and every time they are failing. The failure today is very obvious, because after all these billions that they spent overnight taking the market up 80 points, it all failed. Now, yes, they have succeeded in order to ruse people, because the drop came from a very artificially high level of 1950. So on a closing basis, since yesterday we closed at 1871, today we closed at 1874, it's actually going to show up at whatever marginal level of positive close. If this was going to happen from a bottom of the overnight, then we would have another 400-500 points drop, and it would be pretty much the fifth day of a catastrophic drop. So now everything will be again eyed on what the Chinese will do tonight and what the scumbags of the Federal Reserve will manipulate tonight. Therefore, I am not going to make much of a projection for you. It's the same old. As long as we remain below 1950, we should either continue this nonsense 80 points range, or if tonight again China crashes another 7 or 8%, which in my opinion will be nothing short but a disaster, then we are going to go challenge all these single A's that we have down here, delete them, and once we break below 1831, we will then need to go look at our daily and see what is below that. So once we do break this 1831, there is really absolutely nothing before we come for a test of this low, which is going to be at 1790 to 1800. And if this breaks, I don't know, then kiss the whole thing goodbye, because then it's wide open for a 1700 drop and then 1600. The violence of this drop and the amount of range that it has packed in a short period of time, this is extraordinary serious, very, very serious. And the consequences of it, we have not yet seen it nor feel it, but I can assure you it is not gonna go away just like this, because Mrs. Yellen and other criminals are going to print and spend money we don't have in order to keep the billionaires happy. So be very cautious. 80 points range. It is a violent market. It is a fast market. It is a brutal market. Now, in terms of crude, nothing really much. Nothing at all. A very pathetic bounce on a very tight range. Nothing extraordinary at all. The benchmark remains 40. As long as we remain below 40, this could have been just a 1, 2, 3 session up. Then we're gonna come back down for a retest of 37.75 to 38. However, I must tell you about crude is that because it is not toilet paper like a share of Amazon, or a toilet paper like a share of Priceline that is absolutely useless besides being a piece of paper, this is a real commodity. This is the commodity that we use the most in almost every single product or activities in our lives. Therefore, once it's gonna reach a certain price, which I believe we are getting close to it, because it is going to be so cheap, consumption of it will increase. And as consumption of it will increase because of cheap price, then price will adjust due to increased consumption. And number two, I can also assure you that right now all the mullahs, the Saudis, the Kuwaitis, the Venezuelans, the Russians, and you name it, whoever's life depends on crude, they are starting to freak out. Because when crude is at 80 and all of a sudden you ended up at 40, obviously your revenues are slashed by half. While your revenues are slashed by half, your expenses are not slashed by half. Therefore, you start to create shortages of revenue, which becomes a great problem for a nation that is oil exporter. And then they start to either get together on paper, announce that they're going to cut production, even though that if they agree on cutting the production, they are such little bastards among each other that nobody would cut production so that he would sell more oil than the other. But the announcement could have some kind of a positive impact on the upside. Number two, they can also start to get together and cause geopolitical problems. We have already seen the mullahs showing a brand new missile that can hit up to 500 miles more accurately than any other missiles that they have. When they start to show missiles, they start to show muscles, they start to talk tough. That's all because oil is down and they need some kind of a crisis to make it go back up. So I believe that we are starting to reach a level where oil is starting to be fairly priced, and it's going to be very, very difficult for it to make it go lower, just because of its intrinsic value that it is a very widely used commodity. So if there is a test of 38.15 to 37.75, I definitely believe it's going to be extraordinarily tough to break that low for the short term, and that should provide a very nice buying opportunity, of course by protecting any buy against that low with a very tight stop. As for gold, really not much happened here. It took a little breather, which is normal. I mean, we had a very nice run from 1080 to 11, almost 70. Now we did a little bit of a pullback. There are 3 POCs here that were pending to be retested. We tested one POC. There is possibility that we're gonna come for a test of that second POC right around 1128.6. but then at 11.25 to 11.28.6, I think that little area here should be some kind of an important support for the short term. If we do break below 11.25, then there is another POC at 11.17 down there, which I personally do not see it to go reached anytime soon. On the other hand, if we do come back and trade through again 11.43, then we should go for the retest of today's high and then hit that POC up there at 11.54. So this one looks fine, just a little breathing took place after a very nice move. Nothing looks bearish. The trend line up is still intact, so it could very well come and touch this trend line again. We should be roughly around that POC that I showed you down there at 11.28 or so, and after that it should go back up for a retest of the recent high that we have, and ultimately my price target on the upside is above there, is up there at around 12.20 and then 12.50. So this is it for today. Be very careful. These are very rough time. It was not meant to be, but when you have an institution scumbag like the Federal Reserve, that its only job is to mismanage, its only job is to create bubbles irresponsibly, only us the regular guys to sit down and watch these bubbles burst and hundreds of thousands and millions of lives being affected by them. It is sad, but it is what it is. We have to live with it. Have a wonderful evening. Talk tomorrow.